Hello, this is X-Plane Geek here with X-Plane Flight School Part 1. So in this tutorial we are going to learn the basic controls. We are going to learn how to do a simple flight, and we are going to do the flight by using our VOR instruments. We are also going to learn how to use the autopilot. Today's flight is going to be LaGuardia, KLGA, to Long Island MacArthur Airport, which is KISP. Okay, so what we are going to do is, before we go into X-Plane, we need to find which VOR we need to fly to. Now, right now, you probably don't understand what a VOR is, but trust me, I will explain it later, and you will know what a VOR is by the end of this video. And trust me, you'll know it very well. So, we need to find the VOR to fly to. So what we're going to do is, the airport we're landing at is KISP, landing charts, and then the website I want it from is FlightAware. This is one of the most amazing websites I've ever seen. It's everything you can ever need for a flight. It's just amazing. So here, if we go here, here are all the charts. So now there's an airport diagram right here, and all these charts. Now we are going to be landing on runway 24. That's all you need to pay attention to. Just don't listen to ILS or LOC. I'll explain that in future tutorials, which we'll be doing it. But right now we're going to keep it simple and just focus on runway 24. So that's the runway we'll be landing. So here it is. We're going to click this, and we can see we have our chart. Actually, this doesn't look right. Maybe it wasn't this airport. Excuse me. Wait. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. I clicked 06. Sorry about that. Okay. Here it is. So we can see localizer, or just never mind, runway 24. You can see right here, which is great. So this right here, see this triangle on the chart, is all that is our approach path. This black line is what we're going to follow. So we can see the VOR we need to fly to is Calverton. So I'll write that down. And the frequency is 117.2. So that is actually the most important thing, 117.2, that you need to make sure you have. And then, so we're going to download this, and we will get to it later when it comes to landing. I'll explain everything here, I promise. So let's just download this quickly. I think it's file export as PDF. Okay. And landing chart, and we'll save it on our desktop for later. Okay, so now as you can see, we have it on our desktop as landing chart. And now we can view it in preview right over here. Okay, so now what we're going to do now is we are going to launch X-Plane, which you're probably wondering, why haven't we done that now? Okay, so before we get flying, while this is loading, some people like to fly with their mouse if you don't have a yoke or a joystick. It can be kind of difficult to fly with the mouse, but you can do it. I have a CH Products yoke and throttle, so that's what I'll be using. And the plane we will be flying is an Eclipse 550. Now, this plane is one of my favorite planes. It's such a good plane. I love it so much because it's just got everything and you can do everything on it. It's a jet, but it's an easy jet to fly, and I recommend you download it. I'll put the link to it in the description. Okay, so we're going to fly day and clear because that's the easiest way to do it. And now we will be taking off from LaGuardia. And let's click fly. So, yeah, all the add-ons in this will be in the description. And all my things to make this video will also be in the description. So, this can take a little while to load. So once we get into the airplane, I'm going to show you the controls, and I'm going to tell you the takeoff procedure, and then we will go ahead and take off. Oh, and I'm also going to explain what a VOR is, because by now I've mentioned it so many times and you don't know what it is, so I promise you I'll get to that. So this is almost done loading, I could tell. X-Plane 10 Global 10. X-Plane 10 Global, yeah. Just to make sure that's what this is. And so, yeah. Let's just wait for this to load. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So now here we are in the Eclipse 550. It's just starting up, you see here. Okay. So now, you see this, and you're like, what am I looking at? And it's pretty funny because it's all so simple once I explain it. And you're going to be like, oh, that's so easy. So, let's start out with the controls. Here, we can see is our speed indicator. The numbers on the left, and this little square right here. This is what it will almost always look like in a jet like this. So this is the speed in this black box right here. You see 0, we're at 0 knots right now. And over here on the right is our altitude. Our altitude is our height above sea level. And the key word there is sea level, because some airports are at 5,900 feet, but you'll still be on the ground. So if, let's say you're at somewhere like Denver International, I think it's pretty high up over sea level, so it'll say 5,900 instead of 0. It's not relative to the ground, it's relative to how high you are above the sea. And the sea is 0. But this is pretty close to sea level. You see, we are not on any mountains. As you can see, there's just water right over there. Okay, let's go back in. Okay, so now here, now this is one of the most confusing instruments. The artificial horizon. Our artificial horizon is our most important, but it's a pretty hard thing to understand at first, but it's our most important control. Because let's say you're flying on a foggy day and you can't see the horizon. You don't know if you're flying upside down, if you are banking left or banking right. or if you're flying completely level, or if your nose is completely straight down or straight up. You don't know that if it's cloudy or you're at night, so you use this, your artificial horizon. This yellow triangle right here represents your airplane. And so the tip of it, right over here, wherever that is lined up. Okay, so now let me get into explaining this. The tip right here, this line right here is the horizon. See, it's an artificial horizon. The brown area, if the point is in the brown area, that means you're going down. If the point is in the blue area, that means you're going up. So if your point, let's say if the point of this is at this line right here, this is the 5-degree line. Actually, let's make this easier. 10, because it says 10 right here. Let's say this is up here. That means we're climbing at 10 degrees. We know we're climbing because the point is in the blue. And we know it's at 10 degrees because there's a 10 right here. If this is at right here, we'd be at 15 because it counts by 5s. So if the point was right here, we'd be descending at 15 degrees. And so this right here, what right by my mouse that I'm circling right now, is how you can tell how steep you're banking or how steep you're turning. This little triangle is you, and this little triangle is straight. So if this is lined up with this, you're straight. And if this is lined up with here, you're banking 30 degrees left because this is on the left side of this triangle right up here, which is straight. So if it goes to the left of the straight, that means you're banking left. And each one of these lines represents 10 degrees. So if this is over here, that's 10 degrees. This over here is 20. This over here is 30. And then if this is right here, you'd be banking 20 degrees right. You know that because this is the second line. So we're at 20 degrees, and this is on the right side of the white triangle. So now let's get to this. This is our navigation display. This is how we can tell where we are in this world. So, to make this easier for you to understand, we will only display the VORs in airports because that's all we need to know for this. Take away waypoints, NXRs, TCAS, and NDBs. We will only be flying with airports and VORs. So yeah, you just eliminate them by clicking on them. And so now up here, we can see at what direction we're flying at. Now this says 45, so we're flying 45 degrees. Now when you're thinking of directions in airplanes, you know it's not, oh wait, never mind, sorry. In airplanes, when you're thinking of directions, it's not like north, south, east, west. It's degrees. So 0 degrees is north, 90 degrees is south. 90 degrees is east. 180 degrees is south. 270 degrees is west. And then that's an entire circle. So right now we're at 45 degrees, so we're actually exactly northeast right now. So now let's take a look down here at not down here, just right over here. This little box right here, flaps, you can see what flaps degrees you're at. Each line is 10 degrees, so right here we're at 0, 10, 20. TO stands for takeoff, so you want this arrow to be here when you're taking off. You see if I go flaps down 1, it goes to TO, flaps down 2, it goes to full. And then if I press the flaps up button a couple of times, it'll go all the way up. Now the gears right here is how you know if your gears are down and locked. If they're all green, that means they're all down and they're all locked. If two of them are green and one of them is red, then that means two of them are down locked and one of them is not, which is a bad scenario. If you have all of them red, then you're definitely in for a treat, because that is not an easy landing without gears. This is how you know if your gears are down and locked. Just keep that in mind. And then now we're going to go down here into your GPS right over here. This is where you put in all your frequencies to tell the plane where to go. Now remember when we were doing when we looked at those charts and we saw that VOR and then we saw a frequency 117.2. That is where we put this in. So here's where you would put in your air traffic control frequencies, but we're going to do that in another video. So we are focusing on this bottom half right here. On this bottom half right here. And so if you wanted to change the frequency, you click here. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's zoom in a little bit and we will go down. Okay, so now you can see it better. So you would click this button right here and you can see that blue box goes down here. Whichever number is highlighted in the blue box is the one you're changing. So let's say we wanted to do 118.65. So we make sure it's on the big arrow and we keep on clicking until it goes to 118. Then we make it the small arrow and we go to negative, and there we go. Oh wait, that's 108. Does it not go over 7? Yeah, it doesn't go over 7. Okay. Whoops, sorry about that. Let's say 115.60. That's how you would do it. And now let's say you wanted to change this frequency, then you would click it and it would switch. So you can click them to switch these numbers. Whichever one is on top is the one that's active. So right now 117.20 is the one that's active, and that's the one that was on our chart. So we want to make sure the blue box is down here, and we want to make sure our frequency is on top. Now you might be thinking, what? But our frequency was 117.2. Well, there's always at least two numbers after the decimal when you're dealing with airplanes. So you always have to put a 0 there if it's only one number. You always put a 0 there because you can't just do 117.2 because it just doesn't let you. So now we have the frequency we want is active. So now we can come out of that, and now we will check out our autopilot right over here. Now, this is how we are going to help ourselves with flying the plane. So, AP stands for autopilot. If it's green, if the square next to it is green, that means it's on. If it's black, then it's not off. Then it's off. So ATHR stands for auto throttle, meaning basically autopilot is handling your speed. And the way you know what you set it to is right here back on the artificial horizon. Let's zoom out a little bit so it's not blurry. So the artificial horizon. Up in these black boxes, you can see what you set it to. So here's the speed select button. If I move this up, over here on the left, the speed will go up. So speed goes up, and I set it to, and then I can set it to go down. See, I'm switching it. And then for altitude, you can see over here, we won't be flying with altitude today, because we're gonna do that manually. So you can see right now, when I change this, when this goes up, that goes up. When this goes down, that goes down. Okay. So, looks like we are ready for takeoff. Oh wait, a couple more things. So, the button's in autopilot. So if you click the ALT button, that means hold the altitude that is right here, but we don't need to do that today because we're flying manually besides the VOR. And this is what we will be using today, the HDG, which stands for heading. Now 4-5 is a heading. That's the degree we're at. When you say a direction, they call it heading. When you say like fly heading 200, so you would put 200 into here, and then it would fly 200. So now that's about it. I'll explain these two buttons later. You don't need to know about these. These two buttons are for landing, which I'll explain to you in a future tutorial because we're not doing that type of landing. It's just a manual, easy landing. Okay. So, let's go in. And we are ready for flight. So for the VORs, we've set our frequency, and what we're going to do once we get in the air is we want to make sure that you see this heading knob, which I just told you about. What we're going to make sure is that this purple thing shows where your heading is. You want to make sure it's lined up with the arrow, because the arrow is showing in which direction the VOR is pointing in. And what a VOR is it's basically, it's an imaginary dot, and the VOR we're flying to is near the airport that we're landing at, so that the VOR will get us to the airport. With the VOR plugged in, we can see that the arrow is pointing us towards the airport, and this knob from the heading is aligned with the arrow. So once we get in the air, all we have to do is switch on autopilot and heading, and then we'll be flying towards our airport. So now the speed we want to fly at is about, let's take 200, no, less. That's too far. 230 knots is good. Zoom out a little bit. Oops. Okay, and we are ready for flight. So we will go complete throttle up, and we will put our takeoff flaps down. Complete throttle up, and you can hear the engine spooling up. Release the brakes, and we are using our rudder to stay in the center line with the runway. And slowly pull back on your yoke, and you can see we have successfully taken off. So we will bring our gear up and our flaps up, and we will select our auto throttle, set it to our speed, and we will select heading. now we will bring our flaps up. And now the autopilot is flying us towards our destination. Now we're gonna stay low on this flight. Just to make this easier for you guys. Okay. So now what we'll do is we're gonna cut the video right here. And now what we're gonna do is I'll resume the video once we are near the airport. Okay? So pause X-Plane and see you guys soon, except more like a second because it's not a second for me, but it is for you. Okay, so I have flown to the VOR and it's put me actually on a great approach right into KISP or Long Island MacArthur. So as you can see right here in the distance, I am lined up with the runway. I've slowed myself down a little bit and I'm starting to take down my flaps. I'm gonna add my gear right after I unpause this. So I didn't change much except for take off the heading because now I can fly us in for landing. So let me show you the landing procedure. Now, if you remember, before we saved something to our desktop, which was our landing chart. So if we open that up, we can see what we downloaded earlier, and this is why we got it. So now we've flown to our airport and I've turned us onto our approach, so we're right about here. And so right now we're at about 2,000 feet, which it says we should be. And by the time we get to about 5.5 nautical miles, it says we should be at 1,400 feet. And right, just so you know, I'm looking right over here in this area. This is where it shows you the approach path to the runway. 3.5 nautical miles is your decision height, which is where we can decide if we're going to go around or not, which it's a pretty good chance we're not. And so that's our landing plan. Come straight in. By the time we're at about 5.5 nautical miles, we will make sure we're at about 1,400 feet, and we'll bring her in for landing. So let's go back into X-Plane. And so let's do our landing. So yeah, I will bring my gear down, and my notch of flaps is almost down. I'll reduce my speed to about 165 is about good. Can begin descending it a little bit, pushing my yoke in. If you need, just by the way, speaking of yokes, if you need help setting up, in the future, I will be posting tutorials. Okay, so let's slow down to at about 145 knots, and I will give myself another notch of flaps. And so okay, so yeah, disengage the autopilot. We don't need the auto throttle. We can just do that manually. Okay, let's correct ourselves on our approach. Okay, just adjusting the throttle when I need to maintain a good approach speed, which I'm doing okay. This definitely isn't my best landing. Okay, so we're on a steady approach path, pretty much. We can disable our and so now we make sure all autopilot things are off, and we're looking good. Increase the throttle a tiny bit because we're getting a little bit low. Try and make your corrections when it comes to altitude when you are on throttle. Use your throttle to do your corrections. So if you're too low, you add throttle. If you're too high, you reduce throttle, because that's always the smoother way to go. That way it's not like nose up, nose down, nose up, nose down, because then the passengers won't be happy. So we're approaching 5.5 nautical miles, and as you can see, we're almost at 1,400 feet, so it's good enough. 1,500 feet is good enough. And so once we get closer to the runway, I am going to cut off all throttle, and I'm going to do something which is called a flare, which is where I raise the nose, and when you're landing, you'll always make sure that your back wheel touches the runway first. So when you land, you bring your nose up, your back wheel touches first, and then you slowly let your nose gear go down. And once your nose gear's down, you bring your brake, you put on your brakes, and then you can turn off onto the taxiway. We won't taxi to the terminal. We'll just land. Just very slight corrections, because we don't want to go wacko with the runway or anything. A little low still, so I'll increase the throttle. Okay, I've corrected, so now I can reduce it again to the throttle setting. So, small corrections to line yourself up with the runway. You can just do this visually. You can sort of tell whether you're too high or not. If you don't think you can trust yourself, though, there are lights next to the runway, if you see them, and you basically, the big airports have 4, and the small ones have 2 next to them. If they're too white, that means you're too high. Too red, you're too low. 1 white, 1 red, and you're on the perfect descent path. So you see it's all white, so I'll reduce my throttle a little bit, so it thinks I'm high, it thinks I'm too high, and so I will correct that, and so it should go to red soon. And then on the big airports, you would need 2 red, 2 white to be on the perfect approach path. There you go, there's 1 red. We can go back to the normal throttle setting. Okay, 400 is about a good altitude here. So as you can see, we are coming in for a landing, and so I'm gonna cut off all the throttle once I get over the runway, and then I'm going to flare. That beep right there just shows that you're low. Reduce the throttle, and soon we can cut it off fully. And you can take it in smoothly.
50, 40, 30,
reduce the throttle, cut off the throttle
20,
about now.
10.
Flare up. And brakes. And use your rudder. I like to go to outside view on landing, because I feel it helps me. And there's our landing. So, I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it's helped you. We learned about VORs and how to use the autopilot and how to use landing charts and how to land and take off. We learned all of our controls. I hope you found use out of this video. Goodbye, and see you next time.